Today we're going to be replacing a coolant pump on this 3NTR-A2, and to start us off we're going to want to shut off power to the machine, remove the top lid and side panel. If you haven't already removed the screws from your top lid, there are 8 screws in the front panel that you can remove with a 2.5mm hex key. And then if we come around to the side panel, same story here. You've got 5 screws that run along the side and more screws on the back. We'll put a picture up to show you the exact locations of those. Make sure your machine is off before you do this. And you'll lift up from the bottom and lift straight up because we've got our coolant pump on top, and you want to make sure that we have access for that to slide out. So just a little anatomy of what we're seeing right here. This is our coolant reservoir. All the coolant for the entire system is going to be held in here, the cap on top and the pump below. Most of the failures that we see come from this pump. So that's the main thing that we'll be replacing today, but we'll also walk through how to replace this entire assembly. We've got our power supply, 12-volt power supply for our pump, as well as the lights inside of the printer. So if your pump and your lights are both not running, it's likely a power supply failure. We've got our heat exchanger. This is where we're taking the warm liquid that's coming from the printer, pushing cold air through it, so we're cooling it down. We've got our main power supply, our relays for our heated bed and our heated chamber, and our main 220-volt contactor. So a few things we notice here as soon as we open this machine up. First of all, you can see, since we've got red coolant, it's very obvious to see that we've got a coolant leak. We've actually got coolant all over our contactor down here, and this even shows as a symptom. Sometimes it'll be slow to completely power off. So we'll press it, and you'll see our contactor is going to stay on, and then about 3 seconds later it'll shut off. This normally should be instant. Likely means our coolant is actually shorting somewhere inside of our contactor, and this is a 220-volt system, so just for precaution we want to shut our power off with the back switch, set it to off, and unplug the system. If your printer coolant reservoir is not leaking, you can skip this step, but if it is, we're going to want to clean up the mess, so we're just going to take some paper towels and come in here, again making sure your system is unplugged and powered off completely before we're doing so there's no high voltage danger. Get some paper towels in here. Get the coolant off as much as we can. We've got microfiber cloths or shop rags, whatever works. We're just doing a little bit of cleanup. Making sure to get as much of it as we can, specifically off of the large contactors. And up above, we can start to see where our coolant is actually coming from right there. Clean off on the outside. So after we've done our cleanup, the next thing we want to do is plug power back into the printer and turn the system back on. This way we can begin draining the coolant. So down here is the outlet and up here is the inlet. Coolant is flowing down here into the print head and then back up through this tube, out of there, and back into our reservoir. So what we're going to want to do is pull on this slightly, and I'll get a close-up of what that looks for you. Now, in the case that you do have a dead heat pump, you won't actually have any fluid pushing through here. In this case, this is a working pump, so there is fluid currently moving. So you want to be rather quick here. Put some paper towels below everything, just in case we have a little leak. And pop that top line off. And we're going to drain the coolant from the system. You can hear there and see our coolant pump draining. And this system was already running pretty low on coolant, so not much came out. So with a good bit of our fluid removed, I've gone ahead and reattached our top tube just barely, just to stop any small leaks. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the bottom tube. If you've got a pair of pliers like this with a rubber tip, they can also help remove the pipes a little easier. So again, we're going to take our reservoir that we're draining our fluid into and twisting this slowly to remove it. Again, the pump is on, so make sure you've got your cup directly below it. And then that should slide off. And since we've already removed most of the fluid in the system, not much is coming out, but you can still see a little bit of movement in there. There's actually currently fluid in this pipe, so if we tilt it like that or squeeze it, move everything down, you can get a lot more of that coolant out. So a few other things to note here. First of all, the coolant that we've got in here is a glycol solution. It is totally safe to get on your hands, so don't worry about anything there. Another thing is that if your printer has red coolant in it, make sure you're putting red coolant back into it. And if you've got the clear coolant, you're putting the clear coolant back into it. So now with all of our coolant drained, we're going to again remove this top cap. Make sure we've got nothing else coming out so that these are good to just hang here. Sometimes you can wrap a paper towel around them and kind of jam them behind something so they stay there just in case. And then we're going to shut power off to the printer, unplug everything, and then we're going to unplug the pump from the power supply. You'll see these small gray connectors with the orange tabs on them. What you're going to want to do is grab the orange tab and lift it up just like that and slide out the wire. Super easy, quick connectors. Snap them back down when you're done, do the positive, and we'll do the negative, and now our pump is disconnected. Next, we're going to unbolt the pump from the printer itself. So if we come inside here, you'll see two 2.5 millimeter bolts. We're just going to take our screwdriver and loosen them. I like to loosen both of them first, just slightly. You can see now that our pump is starting to move. Remove the screws by hand now, stick them on top of the printer, and then keeping our pump upright, we're going to just pull it out of the printer like that. So we got the pump on the bench now, and we can see just from the most liquid being kind of up here by the pump, we think that is most likely an O-ring issue. An older O-ring will get cracked and coolant can start leaking from there. So what we're going to do is remove the pump. Again, same 2.5 millimeter screwdriver you use on practically everything. Remove one screw and remove our second screw. So if you've got just the dead coolant pump, this is all you'll need to do is remove this reservoir, take those two screws out, remove your pump, and put your new pump in. So I'm going to grab a pick, and we're going to take our old O-ring, remove that, and we'll take our new O-ring, slot it over the pump like that. It's a little trickier to get stain in there. There we go. Then we'll just go ahead and reinstall this one. Again, if your pump is dead, you'll have a new pump that will have a new O-ring with it. So we'll take that, line up our two screws, and be careful not to over torque these, as we are screwing a metal screw into an acrylic base. It is possible to crack the acrylic, so only go hand tight on here. You can use the torque screwdriver if you want to. In this case, I'm just using a normal screwdriver and just getting it hand tightened. So with our new pump installed, we're going to go ahead and install the entire pump assembly back into the printer. Let's do that now. Gonna hold our pump with the left hand, line the two screws up, get one screw in, kind of get it hand threaded like so. You can see our first screw is holding in there. We'll take our second screw, get it into the rear slot, make sure we're lined up straight, and then we'll get those torqued down just to be hand tight. They don't need to be super tight, just hand tight. And again, working our way backwards through our process here, we're going to grab our power. Again, making sure the machine is off while you're doing all this. Going to take the red cable or the positive, grab our black and orange connector, open it up, put in the positive, grab our black or negative, put in the black wire, connect those on up. Then we're going to take our top barb, slide it back on just like that by hand. And we'll take our lower barb, slide it back on just like that. Now if these connections are getting a little too loose, what you can do is you can take a zip tie and crimp it around that connection. That'll make sure that you're not having a leak around there. But these are fairly new cables, so things are looking good, so we're not worried about a leak in that case. So I've got the power switch on the front clicked to the on position, and I've got power plug back in. So what I'm going to do is hit the on switch, and we should see our pump spin up here. And you can see the liquid moving around, and this confirms that our new pump is in fact working. And we are good to reassemble the rest of the printer. So the next thing we're going to do here is fill the tank back up with coolant. It's always a good idea to check and make sure you don't have any leaks before doing this. Before I installed the tank and the pump, I put everything in the bathroom sink, filled it all the way up with coolant or water, and just made sure nothing was leaking out. In this case, I'm actually going to reuse some of the coolant we took out because this coolant is still good. I'm going to go ahead and pour that back in just to reach the top barb. Just like that. And again, if your printer has red coolant in it, you want to be sure to put red coolant back in. And if you've got clear coolant, you want to be sure to put clear coolant back in. So with some coolant in it, we're now going to hit the on switch. And we'll start to see coolant flowing back through here. You can see our system pressurizing as coolant goes back through. Back. Might take a second to get through this. And here it is coming back up. And there we go. So I'm going to take an extra bottle of coolant here. Top the system off. Just by putting coolant just till above the inlet right there. There we go, you can see some air bubbles working its way out through the system. We put our cap back on. Back out. Sort of reorganize our lines back down here. Just get them pushed in neatly. And you can see those air bubbles in there. Those will work their way out on their own. And our last piece of step is going to be putting the side cover back on. Just like that, and we are good to go.